we possibly can. So we're talking today about intersectionality not being optional, and we've got reassembled a great panel. So if I just go around and everyone just spends a minute introducing themselves, and I'll just start from people that are on my screen. So we'll start with Paula.
Hi, I'm Paula. I am an ICF accredited ADHD coach in training and hypnotherapist. So I work with women mainly with issues around confidence, self-esteem, RSD, that kind of thing. And my background is in early years education. So that's me. Thanks for having me.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Vijay?
Hi, everyone. I'm Vijay. I'm a neurodiverse character artist, workshop facilitator, and public speaker advocating for neurodiversity, hidden disabilities, suicide prevention, and intersectionality. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And then we'll go to Regina.
Hi, I'm Regina. I am the confidence healer and the founder of the network. We provide exclusively inclusive networking for people across all intersectionalities of marginalised groups. So that will be neurodivergence, the disabled community, LGBTQI community, the Black and other ethnic minority communities, people who are financially marginalised, and our allies. And actually, all of my background's in early years education too.
Lovely, thank you. And H.
Hello, everyone. My name's H. Arlo Harris. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a coach and speaker, and I help people unlock their power by understanding and owning their identity. So that is me. I'm going to leave it there.
Fantastic. Have I missed anybody on the panel, or is that everybody on the panel? I think that is everybody on the panel. Right, I'll tell you a bit about myself. My name's Amit Kali, former deputy head teacher in secondary education, and now work as run my own business called For Working Parents, where I talk about digital parenting, online safety, and really try and upskill parents around all the challenges faced in the online world. The personal me, ADHD, and that defines a lot about me. You'll probably notice a bit about that as we go through. So I think Ria's got her hand up. Ria, is that an interjection there?
That was probably one of the politest interjections I've ever done as an ADHD. Are you proud of me?
Go on.
I am horrendous for interrupting, so I'm quite proud of myself there. And that's recorded, so I'm going to show that to everybody on regular occasions. Anyway, I just wanted to pop in for a second because there was something I forgot. Andy Donaldson was supposed to be coming, but unfortunately the day job has took control and she hasn't been able to make it. She's extremely gutted, but she sends her love, and I just wanted to let you know that's why she's not here.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So what this is going to be really is a conversation about intersectionality and thinking about the neurodivergent space and all those kind of spaces, and whether actually our or different voices are being heard. We're slightly behind schedule, so I'm going to sort of condense some of the topics. But the first topic really is, are different voices being heard? And I guess, some of the questions that I'd like the panelists to think about are, how do companies respond to neuroinclusion from an intersectional point of view? And ultimately, are your needs the same as my needs? So, are our voices being heard? And I'm going to randomly ask Regina first what your thoughts are on that.
I would say, the short answer is no. Right, in essence, because when we look at especially neurodivergence, everything that we do know, especially in the autism space, I forgot to say that I'm ADHD, everything that we do know with regards to autism, even in the DSM, is around little white boys, right? So everything that they know about autism surrounds them, but also about other people's experience of us as somebody who has autism, not our autistic experience. I am late diagnosed. I didn't get diagnosed for autism until I was 42, so it's been 2 years, right? But actually, in that instance, a lot of what would be seen as is known as autism would be seen as angry Black woman, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we look at those cultural aspects of it, when we look at my wonderful autistic meltdowns, which do happen, right? Sometimes that can just be seen as, oh, she's just doing the angry Black woman, or this is just seen as aggressive behaviour. Whereas rather than it being, she's really emotionally dysregulated at the moment, what's happening here? And we are seeing that happen more and more. And we can actually also look at the fact that when we are looking at autism diagnoses, and I can only come at it from my experience, like how often, how likely is it that a young Black girl is going to have an effective autism diagnosis and the support that she needs to be able to thrive, based on what at best is cultural ignorance and at worst is institutional racism. So the short answer is no. Long answer is do more.
Thank you. And Vijay, I saw you sort of nodding away at what Regina was saying there. I mean, thinking about what Regina has said from a company point of view, you know, what can companies do better to actually hear people like Regina, see people like Regina for what she is, as opposed to, as Regina was saying, sort of, you know, lazy stereotypes that we often get branded with?
I think the key thing is acceptance. It's all these sort of interpersonal attitudes, like empathy, acceptance, understanding, kindness. You know, if you go down to that foundation and accept people, whether they're a company or a person or whatever, you know, if you accept a person for who they are, whatever their diversity is, wherever they are on the spectrum, then that, I think, is half the battle, you know, already gone. And then there isn't the discrimination, you know, against the Equality Act 2010, all the protected characteristics. I think there is, you know, my response to that question would be that there's more of an emergence, or it's a yes and no in terms of our different voices being heard, because there's more of an emergence because there's still tokenistic behavior going on, and there's still cancel culture, even though, you know, there's DEI. So I think there's a catching up going on, and reasonable adjustments and accessibility are being sort of deployed. But I think there's gaps, you know, where niches sort of can be exploited more in a business sense. So that's my answer to that.
Thank you. And one of the parts of that question actually was thinking about equity and equality. I mean, you know, some companies do some great things around equality, but I wonder if equity is what we need more of, which is understanding that there are different needs for different people. H, if you don't mind me coming to you, you know, are your needs the same as mine?
No, and I think, do you know what's really interesting? As Regina and Vijay were talking, I wrote one word down with my ADHD, so I didn't interrupt. I was writing things down, and then capital letters, I just wrote space. And I feel like the issue, one of the biggest issues especially when we're looking around companies or any space, and Vijay mentioned the business space as well, it's almost as if like you can't take up too much space, because being intersecting takes up too much space. It's like we as a society seem to be like, yes, still tokenistic, but it's sort of like, okay, we can deal with this one thing, but you put those two things together, there's not enough space for that. You're taking up too much space. We haven't got the time, the energy, the effort, the resources to you know, to manage this. And it almost is very much seen as this manageable problem in the same way, like if accounts didn't pay out, it's a management issue, which then, you know, is incredibly depersonalizing, institutionalizing almost. And I would say, like, you know, aside from optics, there is also intersections. So none of us here are absolutely or ever going to be the same, even if the color of our skin is the same, even if our religious beliefs are the same, even if our gender identity, our sexuality, we could have three things that are the same with different people who have had a different experience, and we're not good enough at acknowledging that people need space, because I think very often there's a perception that if we give a group space, we take space away from others. And that is just fundamentally incorrect, but it's that scarcity mindset that capitalism thrives on. So again, I'll go with Regina's short answer of no.
Thank you. Thanks for that, H. And Paula, you talked about being formerly working in sort of early years education. Just thinking about that career, because I think Regina said she was in the same space and I was in secondary education. So just thinking about that sector for a second, would you say that actually, let's focus on that sector for a moment, intersectionality is recognized and the needs of different people are celebrated, or at least at worst accepted?
I mean, I would say that they try to, because obviously when you're teaching children, small children, you know, we've got to try to help them learn to be inclusive of others, right? So I would say that they try to, but I'm not sure. It's a hard one for me to answer because it hasn't really come up for me. Like, there has been no time where I've needed to ask for like adjustments or anything like that. So it's really difficult for me to answer. I don't know. I feel yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And H mentioned that also from secondary education. I just want to sort of share my thoughts on this, and I'll come back to you, H. I see you got your hand up. When I was diagnosed with ADHD last year, actually 2024, so well into adulthood, having known that I had ADHD for a long, long time, because working in education, I was seeing children, and I was saying, that is me. You know, that is exactly what I do or did when I was young. And so I thought, I'm going to go through the process. But when I used to, oh gosh, sorry, I've got some background noise. H, let's come to you and I'll try and sort this background noise out.
Hi. Yeah, so I didn't forget, it's typical, isn't it? I worked in secondary education. I worked in a school that had multiple aspects of SEN, including a unit, including an in mainstream provision that ran parallel to. We were like a hub. We were, you know, somewhere that people would come to look at. Yet the absolute irony, you know, for example, I'm also dyslexic. We'd be sitting in a presentation about dyslexia, saying that we shouldn't have so many words on a slide, and I'm looking at the literal example of what they are telling us not to do, as if it couldn't be possible that any of the staff members that are receiving this training could be dyslexic. It was very them and us. And it was like what applied there didn't. And, you know, I think from my experiences in education, I left education very recently, it sort of was landing at a point where it's like, we know these people exist within our staff team, but again, it was sort of like, oh, how on earth do we do this? Because everything was kids focused, you know. It was how do we? They couldn't logistically see how reasonable adjustments could work, and very often when I was talking to neurodivergent colleagues, I would see that people were in situations where they'd sort of said something had been offered, but it was in no way ever going to be suitable because the education system and the way it operates is so fixed. And I think anybody that's been here in education will have looked at things in their time in education and gone, if we just didn't do this like this, this would be accessible. If we did 40-minute lessons and 15-minute breaks in between, we would instantly become accessible, like infinitely more accessible to infinitely more young people, including those who may or may not be recognized as neurodivergent. So that was my experience. Thank you for sharing. I hope you sorted the sound out.
Yes, I have. Thank you. I've got that. I think I was in the middle of just sort of sharing a snippet of my story, actually. So, as I say, I was diagnosed last year. And when I used to tell my colleagues that I think I've got ADHD, hence why I can't sit in meetings, or why I'm chewing my card, or why I'm always interrupting people, or why I'm zoning out, I used to get told by my colleagues, you're not telling the truth, you're lying, as though I was trying to somehow find a reason to justify bad behavior, you know, in the position that I was in. You know, I was in a position of leadership and struggling in some meetings. And I when I look back at that now, I think, gosh, imagine me telling somebody who says they are undiagnosed ADHD that you are just trying to justify bad behavior. And so part of that process of me getting the diagnosis, yes, it was for me, of course, but actually part of it was justification and validation of the fact that, no, it wasn't bad behavior. I wasn't struggling in meetings or interrupting or coming across as rude because I was just a bad person. It was because, you know, there is neurodivergence in play. And I think those experiences, like everyone has said, really, really shape us. I want to just move the conversation slightly forward, but also pick up on some of the things that we've talked about, which is that equality versus equity debate. Because I do a lot of work with corporates in the work that I do, and I often ask them about this, and they all have, you know, some really great equality policies that really try to look after everybody in their space. But when you start mentioning the word equity, I start hearing things like, it's unfair to treat one person like this if we can't treat another person in the same way. And one example that somebody gave me was such a telling example, and she was a Zimbabwean lady, and she said to me that her aunt had died, and she asked her work for time off to grieve the loss of her aunt, and her workplace gave her a day to attend the funeral. And the point that she was trying to make was that in her culture, and this might be the same in many of us, our cultures, in her culture, losing an aunt was akin to losing a mother. And so that aunt was like a mother to her. So she hadn't just lost a family member who she can just go to the day of a funeral. She was grieving as though she had lost her mother, and she needed time to grieve. She needed a week, 2 weeks, whatever it might have been, to grieve. And she wasn't given that because the policy of the workplace stated that unless it's an immediate family member, i.e. perhaps a parent, a sibling, God forbid, a child, you're not entitled to that grief. So I worry then sometimes companies have great equality policies, but I don't know whether equality is actually what we need. I don't know who wants to come in on this. Regina, I can see you sort of nodding away as well there. If you're happy to share your thoughts on that.
I mean, I'm anti-equality. It's all about equity, right? It's just how I am. And so actually, some people might just need the one day. Like in my culture, on my mum's side, I'm Jamaican. We have 9 nights. I need the 9 nights. I need 2 weeks, right? Because actually, that is a grieving process for us. So I had it when I was in corporate, and my nan had passed away, and they were like, "You can have 3 days." But I'm like, "But I need 2 weeks." I had to take leave because as a family, we have responsibility to help others transition through the grieving process because of what it is that we do. Had to take annual leave. They could have given me that time off because it was like it's at our discretion. But if it's at your discretion, be discreet, right? And so it's equity that is really needed. Are we all given what we need in the moment to be able to thrive? And that's
Thank you. And Vijay, you had your hand up as well, though. Do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think we all have varying needs, but we need equal access to opportunities. So talking about grievance, I was on a bereavement course, and I learned that I'm just going to say specifically of grievance because I have been discriminated in various different settings. But when my grandma passed away in 2012, I couldn't really work for a couple of months after that, and the employer actually let me go. So I think there was a bit of discrimination there. And it turns out after doing this bereavement course that grievance can play up in your body. Well, it can show as physiological symptoms as well as psychological symptoms. It's a whole that's why I was in a course for it actually. So whether it's grievance or menopause or chronic health issues, I feel that individuals should be given enough sort of leeway. I mean, a couple of months I guess is a long time, but there should be equal access to various resources because we all have different needs. And we have to sort of bear in mind people's different, I don't know how to word the last bit I'm trying to say, but I'll stop there. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say with that. Thank you.
Sure. Let me flip this on its head. Let's get a little bit controversial here for a second, because let's approach this from the point of view of an employer. Let's say we're running a business and we've got people that are working for us, and somebody in exactly what we talked about have said they've lost somebody or whatever it might be that they're going through, and they need time off, and they don't know how long that time off is going to be. We don't know what grief looks like. I lost my mother a few years ago. We all have different journeys of grief. But let's think from an employer's point of view, and let's think about that equity. If you are not ready to come back to work for two months, let's say, at what stage do I, as an employer, say to you, listen, this is too much. I can't run a business with you being off for this amount of time. I'm trying to be flexible. I'm trying to be supportive. I'm trying to give you the time that you need. But ultimately, I can't be that flexible for you. You need to either come back to work or sadly leave. Is that discrimination? Is that not taking into account the needs of individual people? Or is that just, as we see from some people in society, don't we? We hear this kind of common sense kind of whatever their version of common sense means, but that common sense approach, are we taking it too far? Or, are there ways that actually workplaces can really thrive and at the same time be wonderful to the people that work for them? H, you had your hand up. It's gone down now, so I don't know if you wanted to come in on that.
I'm happy to come in on that. I think I'm probably going to miss some stuff, and I'm sure my my friends here can support me on that. I think it really does perpetuate from that sort of like dole dossers, anybody with a neurodivergence, a disability. It really stems from that, you know, I'm going to use the word mantra, that is pumped out and continues to be pumped out, you know, throughout society, throughout our government. I think there's two things here that come up for me. The first is like the real use of reasonable adjustments and flexible working. Like, have you really used it, or is it, because I've seen it play out, I have seen it with my own eyes play out tactically, where I've seen people with the, you know, with the book, like, well, if we only have to do this and this, and then we can just get rid. We don't actually have to really want to get this person into the workplace, because I've also seen it when somebody's in better favor, that support is better. And you can't call that out, like, because it's insidious and there is no hard evidence. You know it's happening, but you can't call it out. And I also think, you know, in terms of from a neuroinclusion perspective, because these are non-visible, at times difficulties, I will use the term here, I think that's what we're perpetuating on. When I had significant difficulties with the bones in my ankles and had to transfer into using a wheelchair, nobody gave a shit how much time off I had. I could have had years off, and nobody, like, it would have taken a significantly longer amount of time for them to come for me than I know that they would if I had been off with depression, anxiety, or burnout, or anything. I know it in my soul, I know it in my body. I'd have had at least 6 months, no one would have touched me. I was off for 6 months, I had surgery. Nobody rang me, no pressure to come in, no pressure to do any work. But when that's non-visible, I do believe it is different. So I think that argument that you referred to, I mean, it comes out really early, like how long? But like, my reverse question is, so how much are we willing to do to maintain this good worker? Or is it an excuse to get rid of somebody that is maybe you see as potentially problematic, or you've got an easy out?
Right. Yeah. No. Thank you. Thanks, H. And Paula, you work with. I know you mentioned you're an ADHD coach in training, but I'm assuming you've worked with people who are ADHD. Do you see this playing out there as well? Do you see kind of the need for reasonable adjustments and the need for that kind of equity in the workplace not necessarily being met?
In the work, like, so I can only speak for what I do and how I work with people, and what I would say is equity for sure is the best way forwards. Like, when it comes to working with people on an individual basis, obviously I could have practices where I, you know, look at everything from an equal point of view and work with everyone in the same way, but it doesn't get anyone anywhere to do that, I don't think. I think everything has to come from a place of equity, where we are looking at things on an individual basis in order to really help a person move forward. So with regards to the workplace, I can't really answer, but when it comes to, yeah, the traditional, let's see, so yeah. That's my answer. Sorry, I'm not a verbal processor, so I really need the time to think and be able to structure what I'm saying.
No problem.
Sometimes things come out.
If it's okay with you.
Yeah.
If you pop your hand up when you're ready to contribute, I'll do it that way rather than me putting you on the
that'd be better for me. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Has anybody, by the way, on the panel seen any great policies in the workplace where actually equity is at the heart of that policy? I can see everybody thinking. That suggests to me straight away that maybe we haven't seen too many great policies, but it'd be wonderful to know if there are any companies out there that are, you know, we think have got this, not necessarily right. I'm not sure anybody's ever going to get it right, but has anybody got, you know, close to being equitable, where actually individual needs are listened to and reasonable adjustments are made based on the needs of the person rather than the needs of kind of, you know, people as a whole, and not talking about kind of what's fair is we've got to do the same for everybody kind of thing. Has anybody seen that in the workplace? silence there. The silence there says a lot, doesn't it? So I think it just shows, doesn't it, how far society. And it goes back to the kind of devil's advocate point that I was making earlier. That I wonder if some workplaces just see it as too much of a problem and financially too much of a burden to allow people to have kind of equitable sort of processes. H, go for it.
I think it's a matter of flexibility, and I'm not saying that any of us here have the answer, because also it will look very different in very different businesses and very different modalities. You know, I've got a particular client who is a nursery head teacher. They have ratios in that environment. They have to have a certain number of bodies to small people. So her having staff off creates her a significantly bigger problem than an organisation where staff could work from home or block their time or work from 5 till 7 rather than 9 till whatever. So I think in places where workplaces can allow flexibility, they need to I think everyone really needs to double down on what are we doing because we think we're meant to, and this is the way it's always been done. Where is the actual flexibility? Because I think so often we can get trapped, especially in a corporate world, in the public service world, into being this is the way, and it's the only way we can do it. And actually, there are parts of flexibility, and also I think being upfront from an earliest stage and age to be able to say, these are the reasons we can't be flexible. Like the nursery example, you have to be in the building because it's in ratio. Then when you approach a workplace, you know what you're going to, and that doesn't allow for when circumstances change. I get that. And I think it's just the acknowledgement that it isn't perfect, but what do we need to do to make it better?
Sure. Thanks for that, Hate. And I must say, actually, on behalf of all the educators in the room, and I'm speaking on behalf of you here, but tell me obviously if you disagree. I think education, where we teach children all about inclusion and flexibility and all of that, I think education is the least inclusive and least flexible sector that there is. And I get what H is saying about the need to physically be in the building because you're teaching children and those things. But there are some of these multi-academy trusts that are trying. I've seen a few that are trying to do a little bit of kind of working from home during your free periods or leaving early, coming in late, whatever it might be. But I just found education, and I was a deputy head teacher, so I was in some ways responsible for that inclusion, but I just couldn't find a way to make it work for people because you need to physically be in the building. Regina, your hand is up.
So there's two things that I want to say. One is, I think in the workplace there's so much that needs to be done. I got rejected from so many jobs and promotions, and the feedback was always, you don't give eye contact. You didn't give eye contact, and that was my feedback. Everything else, smashing, amazing, we'd love it, but you didn't give eye contact in your interview. Now there are two reasons I don't give eye contact. One, I'm Jamaican, and you don't look a superior in the eye. It's rude, rude. So rude. That's cultural. You wouldn't do that. Absolutely not. Even though if any parents, grandparents are speaking to me, and especially if it's something that is, I've been told off, right? Which is normally what's happening in my family, right? So you'd look down, and so you wouldn't do that. And so they weren't taking that into account. Now knowing what I do know, I also have autism and I really struggle. I've had to learn eye contact, and then even now as a process, I'm am I giving the eye contact? Am I looking at the person? What am I doing? I struggle with video calls. Whose eyes am I looking at? I don't know. So it's UH at the moment, right? So there's that, right? So that's now a learned behaviour at mine. So I know that I'm better at eye contact because I was if I'm going to get jobs or get clients or get things, I've got to look at them, because people need me to look at them, and actually it's really uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable thing. But also with regards to schools, even when it's something that is not around neurodivergence, my daughter had to have surgery on both of her knees in school time, both of her knees together. She wasn't physically going to be able to get into school. I gave the school enough notice to say she's not going to be in school. She's going to miss at least a month of school, right? Because she's going to be at home with her legs wrapped up in bandages and she's not going to be able to walk, right? And they were like, oh, well, we've got this external school thing. I'm still waiting to hear from external school, right? And I'm just how have schools gotten to a point where you can't teach my kid if she's not in the building, when I can teach my whole community and we're not even in the same country? How have we gotten to that point where you can't just live stream her lessons and she can jump in? And so it's even just that level of it. There's so much that isn't being utilised, whereby you could actually make it's a reasonable, like Zoom, like it's a they've all got teams, right? I'm sorry, Rhea, I hate teams, but anyway, they've all got teams, right? They all have it. You all have it. You've all got the school version, right, which is like the free version. Like my husband's best friend is head of IT for Academy Schools. I know what they've got, right? They have the technology to be able to do what they need to do. They're refusing to do it when they could actually give these reasonable adjustments. And so my son has whole friends who have left school because they can do the lessons, they can focus, they just can't focus in the classroom environment. Like, Zoom them in. You can still teach and Zoom the kid in. Why? That is, for me, that's like, as somebody who used to teach, like, how difficult is that? You were doing it, well, I mean, you were doing some semblance of that during lockdown. So how can we now everything has to be in person?
Sure. No, that's great. Thank you. And I'm just keeping track of the chat here. There's some great comments coming in, and Heidi has commented on the fact that we did an example there of a reasonable adjustment right there with Paula, you know, wanting to sort of volunteer her thoughts rather than be asked her thoughts. So that's, you know, small things that I didn't even realize that was making an adjustment there. I just thought that was the sensible and fair thing to do. I'm just conscious of time, so I wanted to talk about neuroinclusion in, you know, your world, my world, our world, because I was talking, I do some talks in my community. So my mother tongue is Punjabi. So when I'm speaking in Punjabi about ADHD, because, you know, awareness of neuroinclusion in my culture, zero, non-existent pretty much. So if I'm talking in Punjabi, the problem that I've got is actually some of these words don't exist in my language. So if I'm talking about neuroinclusion, and I'm a fluent Punjabi speaker, if I'm talking about neuroinclusion, I haven't got the foggiest idea what that word, there might be a word, but it's probably such a deep-rooted word that I've never used in my life or come across in my life that I don't know it. And so when you're trying to talk to people in various cultures and you're trying to sort of upskill and educate, you know, various cultures about whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD, dyslexia, whatever, you know, issue it might be, I find it quite a challenge. And then I find myself often just giving up and actually saying I can't be bothered to explain what ADHD is, because A, I'm not sure I have a full grasp of what ADHD is because it's so personal to me and how it affects me. And B, I almost can't be bothered to explain to somebody who isn't just is not going to be willing to listen and not going to be willing to sort of change their thought process. And it goes back to what we say about visible kind of issues versus non-visible. How is it in your culture? How are things in your culture? You know, have you had trouble? I mean, Regina, you've spoken about sort of, you know, your Jamaican culture. You know, I've spoken a bit about my sort of Punjabi culture. How are you getting across your sort of your needs, your neurodivergence to those communities? Vijay, I don't know if your hand was up, but it's gone down again. But if it was up, happy for you to come in on this.
I love what you just said, because that's exactly what, as a British Indian, there's no word for autism in my language. So what I find is, it's kind of like in art, there's a thing called negative space. So that's essentially the sort of, let's say we're trying to draw a table, we would negatively draw that table by drawing the space around the table, the black space around the table. The void of that space in the middle would visualize what would be a silhouette of a table. This is the same way in my language, is why I realize that we have to sort of use words to go around to describe the words such as autism or ADHD or neurodivergence. But I think it's more complicated than a language. I mean, language, I feel, is the premise of the understanding, you know. And once you have understanding, then there could be empathy and other things. But, you know, there's also stigmas and taboos and shame, you know, where, you know, if there's those things such as, oh, you brought shame on the family because of the way you are, then that gets in the way of empathy and understanding. So, you know, again, for me, it's all about those interpersonal attitudes, behaviors, you know, like awareness. If you can't do the first sort of step, which is, I feel, acceptance, then, and you don't have the language, then that's it. You know, it's pretty challenging. So thank you for that. I really put that in there.
Well, yeah, just to add on to that as well, actually, I'm just trying to think of what I normally say in my language, in Punjabi. So what I say is something called Dimaag di Bimari. And to translate that into English, that means illness of the brain. which of course is not what we're talking about here, but that's the only thing that I can think of in my head of translating something to do with autism or ADHD, you know, in my language. That's how far away the language is from what the actual issue is. Anybody else want to come in on that in terms of your cultural experiences?
Regina, do you want to go together?
Do you know what? I've got this thing, like you put it in the comments, there's this whole concept of being able to pray that autism and ADHD away. Like you can't, and I literally say now, I walk into rooms, and if I'm walking into rooms where it's my culture and this is what I'm speaking about, is like, I have ADHD and you can't pray it away. You absolutely
I hear
cannot
that
pray.
a lot as well, pray away.
Things now where people are actively taking their kids to church, right? There's a whole trend. They're taking their kids to church and then the pastor touched him on the head. And now he no longer has autism. Like, no, your kid's masking.
Yeah. The kid was terrified, and now
he's terrified and he's now masking. And so I recall actually going to my mum and saying, "Mum, this is what I am now." And she's like, "No. They just like to label things. You're just a little hyper."
I remember, and I remember the, you know, I do a lot of work with a learning disability and autistic theatre company and arts organisation in Mansfield, and they recently did a project about institutionalisation. We're not that far away from it. Historically, we like to try and position ourselves very far away from asylums and institutions. From chatting with elders within the community, they were talking to me about a lot of Afro-Caribbean people, a lot of people of colour were placed into those institutions when they had very acute mental health difficulties, but would be stuck inside of those institutions for years. And then historically, if we're very honest with ourselves, that's not too dissimilar from where we are now. So I know that there was a real fear within my family about, don't be associated with that because they'll lock you up. And that is, you know, we don't, almost like we don't want to know. The devil in you, the devil in that is over there. You don't go to the devil because you'll end up in there. And that was really, it was almost like la 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 la. It was like they couldn't hear it because the prospect of what could happen terrified them.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
That, like the madman or the mad woman or the mad child. Like it's adding mad, like regardless of what's going on, it's always something that is mad. It's always something that is just like, it's othered. It's not of us. So it's either madness or it's a demon, right?
And I've just seen a comment from Heidi again there about the numbers of autistic black and brown people in inpatient care is just disproportionately high here in the UK. And you know, sometimes I find that in the UK where in some things we're obsessed with data, and in other areas we almost ignore data, don't we? We're obsessed with data when it comes to crime. We're obsessed with data when it comes to, you know, those kinds of things. But when it comes to mental health, when it comes to neurodivergence, when it comes to these things, data almost doesn't matter. Or data, we ignore the data. We ignore the kind of patterns the data might be showing because it might be skewed or it might be wrong. So I wonder if actually now that there's, you know, and I think Regina, you touched upon this, you know, we've got more and more people being diagnosed with certainly ADHD than ever before. And, you know, when I tell people about my ADHD, some of the responses that I get is, oh yeah, we've all got a bit of ADHD inside of us. And I really, that drives me nuts, that one does. And the other one is, oh, bloody hell, everyone's got ADHD these days, you know, and it's almost as though you're back at the, you're not being seen, are you? So we're fighting against, I mean, we've got people who all look very different here. You know, I'm a turban wearing Sikh man. When I walk into a building, I'm already on the back foot because people have, you know, made a judgment based on how I look. So I'm already on the back foot. So now I've got to do that extra bit of work to prove that I am just like you. I'm a normal bloke, but I happen to have ADHD and I happen to be a turban wearing Sikh man. Other than that, there's probably not a great deal different about us. So I worry that actually people who come from different communities and ethnic minorities are not only still fighting, you know, we would have hoped our ancestors would have fought the battle of ethnicity, but we're still fighting that battle. But on top of that, we're now fighting this additional battle where some of us are, you know, neurodivergent, or some of us have issues that can't be seen. And I find that a real challenge. And I wonder if anybody else, just as we draw towards the kind of question stage of the panel, I wonder if anybody else has sort of faced those battles as well. can see H frantically trying to unmute.
Yeah, and I absolutely would agree. And I also wrote down something earlier about intersectionality, and I can't find it. When you touched upon about, you know, our ancestors fought these battles, you know, and I feel most of us here are quite holistic. We read, so we will have read about intergenerational trauma, right? The responses, the inbuilt biological responses that have adapted from generations of trauma. You bring neurodivergence into that, and how our experiences, your experiences as a turban wearing Sikh man, come into that. Your neurodivergence is not going to show up in the same way, further marginalizing your experience of existence. And so we have to listen, right? We have to listen, not to you're a turban wearing Sikh man with ADHD, so you speak for all turban wearing Sikh men who have ADHD. You may speak to many points that affect them, but your experience is so unique to you. And that's why those invalidating statements like everybody's got ADHD, but nobody has your experience of ADHD. Nobody has your particular experience the same way in life. And I think we like, because our brains, I can't remember, there's a term for it where our brains like to stereotype and streamline because it makes thought processing easier, but it is a choice. We can make a different decision to not think like that, knowing that when we think like that, it creates a stereotype.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I am conscious, you know, I want to make sure people get away at 1 o'clock. I know we did start a little bit late. There's been some great talk there about, you know, what we may be able to do. I don't know if the people in this room are going to be able to solve all the problems that exist out there in society. But the great thing is that we're talking about these things, and it's wonderful to see, you know, people from different walks of life with different experiences. Although most of us have educational, professional experience, you know, we're able to share those stories and recognize those really important differences. I want to now just ask, I know we've only got a small number of people in the live, but I think a lot of people will be watching the recording. I just want to ask if anybody has any questions, because I'm sometimes quite conscious, actually, when I'm talking to, you know, somebody, let's say a white person, I'm always conscious about making them feel as though, you know, I don't want to make any white person feel as though they owe me anything, or they owe me an explanation, or they have to treat me differently. Yes, of course, I just want to be treated, you know, for who I am. But I worry that some of these conversations, are we at risk of, you know, putting, you know, maybe doing more damage to the cause that we're trying to raise by alienating ourselves further? I've asked another question. I shouldn't have asked another question, because that's a question I'm sure panelists will want to answer. But I'm interested to hear if anybody else in the panel here has any questions. And actually, just to go back to that, Ria actually specifically asked me to host this panel for that reason, was that actually she felt, as a white person, perhaps that she wasn't best placed to host this panel. I would have had no problem with Ria hosting this panel, or somebody that's white. I think we've got to all, you know, we're all in this together. But I worry I wonder if, and I'm just thinking out loud here, you know, tell me if I'm talking rubbish, but I just wonder if we are, you know, are we alienating ourselves further by talking about this so loudly? Are we? I don't know. Does anybody want to tell me? Go on, Regina, go for it.
I think I'm thinking no, because I think when we're looking, if you are wholly looking at intersectionality in itself, we need to go beyond the, I'm not saying don't see colour, because I think it's bullshit that we don't see, we all see it, right? We can see it, right? Some of us are browner than others, some of us, like, it's just how we are, right? But actually, even within the white community, and I use that term very loosely because, again, there are different cultures within there, the experience is different. So I think if you are wholly intersectional, you really look at actually how the experience is different, because even I have intersections. I am Black. I'm actually African and Caribbean, and the response to my autism is very different on both sides, right? I am also perimenopausal, right? So then there's that intersection as well. So even coming into it as a white woman, there are going to be intersections within there as well, depending, we all sit in these different community pots. And so I think what we really need to start being is just respectful of the fact that all of our experiences are different, but also be curious about other people. That's how we do things, like curiosity. Be curious, be open to and willing to listen to other people's experiences, but also own your privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to come on to that, actually, you talked about being African. It might surprise you if I say that I'm actually African. and people get surprised when I say that because I'm not black.
It doesn't, because I'm Kenyan.
Well, guess I am currently sitting in Arusha in northern Tanzania right now. So I'm doing this call from Tanzania because my parents are born in Tanzania. My
I've
wife
got
is
family in
from Arusha.
Tanzania too. I'm Luo, so we're everywhere.
We must talk, Regina. We must talk offline. But yeah, there was a huge movement of Indian people in the sort of 20s and 30s into East Africa, into Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, and a few other states. And so, you know, my family sort of stayed here until the 70s. My parents are both born here. But when I tell people I'm African, they think that can't be right. How can you be African? You're not black. There's just that association, I think, isn't there? To be an African, you must be black. But look, there's 5 minutes left, so I promised that we would take some questions. I can see that there is a question in, a bit of a request from Heidi here, and I hope I'm saying that right, Heidi or Heidi. Actually, we know each other, don't we? We've spoken before. I'd love to have a myth bust that we can take away from each panelist, something we can use as a quick fix, and I know there isn't such a thing, but a simple thing that we can remind ourselves of as white people who want to be intersectionally aware. Love that question. Does anybody want to go in? H, you've got some notes written down, so I'm going to. Before I come to you, Vijay has had his hand patiently up.
Sorry,
so
Vijay, I got really excited.
Vijay.
I've got one question that anyone can apply. Is it true? Is it true? That's the main question, because we have a lot of stories playing up in this mind. Our body is often, if we're traumatized in the past, we're neurodiverse, we're distracted by surroundings. So I think it's really important to check in and ask oneself, is it true? Thank you.
Great. Yeah, great. Go on then, H.
Right, that's a great question, Vijay. I think something that you said, and it's important that to caveat it, is that don't presume advocacy intends guilt. In advocacy, are there people who would like to elicit that in you? Yes. The same way that there are racists and there are bigots, we know that we want to presume that they are the minority. So let's let them be. Okay, let's let that be the minority. But do not presume the intention is in guilt. And the other thing, I used to teach my kids this when I used to work in schools. I used to teach them, because they were kids, okay, cool. Do you feel like you can tell me more about it? So if someone tells you something that you don't understand, they tell you that they have ADHD, they're autistic, this is their experience, rather than going, we put that stock phrase in, okay, cool. Do you feel that you can tell me about that? We're not requesting that. We're not saying tell me. We're saying, do you feel that you can tell me about that?
Lovely.
And if there's an answer that, then it's no.
Love that. Love that. Any of the other panelists want to offer a question or a myth bust?
I would say more of a myth bust. Like, we're not all the same. We're not all the same. When I tell people that I'm Jamaican and Kenyan, they go, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Like, it's not a thing, right? But actually, we're not all the same. So even within, because people say the Caribbean community, but actually my sisters are like Jamaican and Kittian from St. Kitts. So there's two aspects. And even within my understanding of the Punjabi community, it's very different depending on which part of the Punjabi community that you are from. So like black isn't a monolith, like Indian isn't a monolith. We are all very, very different. We all have very, very different backgrounds. My background is very middle class, right? Which in some people's minds, black and middle class aren't a thing, but it's a thing, right? It's absolutely a thing. So I want you to just understand that our experiences are very different. And although there are cultural ties that kind of join us all together, because we are especially here in a country that in reality isn't ours, we were kind of forced to be here, right? You know, in reality isn't ours. We have a culture that is kind of completely away, and that is kind of what bonds us. But we're not all the same when our experiences are different. We've got intelligent black people and not so intelligent black people. You know, we've got black people who love all of the drip, and some of us who just don't. I love a primani. Like, do you know what I mean? They're like, we are just so different. So just bring it back to the human.
Great. Paula.
No, am I off mute? Yeah. No, no, I was actually thinking along the same lines with that myth that, you know, we're all the same, or we're not, you know, that we're not all the same. Because even in this conversation today, I picked up some things. My background is Jamaican as well, right? That's my heritage. And yet when Regina was talking about, you know, the funeral thing and having 9 days to grieve, I was like, I've never heard that before. Like, so we're so different in the way that we're raised as well, and who's been in our lives as well. I was raised in very white, all white areas, right? So the way I've been raised could be very different. And the way that my family sees neurodivergence is accepting, right? So I get like a little piece of, actually, it's not like they wouldn't be saying pray it away. But often that is the narrative when you're talking to a Black person, you know, from what they might have heard. So we are all different. We've all been raised very differently, even though we might be the same color and from the same, you know, area of the world. Like, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, look, it is 1 minute past one. So firstly, I want to thank all of the panelists for your amazing kind of input. It's my first time hosting something like this, so I thoroughly enjoyed hosting. It's been great. So thank you to Ria for allowing me the opportunity to do that. I think Ria did want to just come back in and wrap up the session. So what a wonderful chat with everybody, and it'd be great to connect with everybody. By the way, I've seen some comments about connecting. We must all connect on LinkedIn. Maybe if everyone wants to put their LinkedIn handle in the chat, we can all then send some connection requests. I'm doing that as we speak while Ria wraps us up.
I'll be very, very quick. I just wanted to say thank you very much to everybody who's come on today. They've all volunteered the time to share their knowledge. So I really do appreciate that. And thank you all for being so honest. And I've learned loads of stuff here. And maybe I should have hosted it. Maybe that's something I need to think about in the future. But I was trying to be intersectional. I don't know what I was trying to be. I was trying to be, I don't know what the right word is. Anyone help me out? Anyone got a good word for me?
Platforming. Yeah, platforming. Like,
yeah, I was trying to be platforming.
Like using your platform to allow the voices of marginalised and underrepresented people to be heard. Own it.
And that's it. I'm going to hire H now to just do all my talking for me. So yeah, so that's exactly what I was trying to do, but I couldn't think of any words. But yeah, thank you for everybody who's come today. Thank you for all the support. I will send the recordings out to you in an email as soon as I possibly can. And I love you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
I met you a mega. I know you said it was a
debrief.
I know that you said that it was your first one, but you were mega. You did a really good job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean,
I really enjoyed it. You controlled